So for those of you that don't know, my name is Councillor Mike Hewitt and I'm chair of the committee. I'll just remind all members, as ever, if you can't make the meeting, please can you try and arrange a substitute. The agenda pack, as always, is available via ModGov online and via the council website. When I invite any members or officers to speak, please can you state clearly who you are, and for the benefit of anyone that's listening online. The meeting is being recorded as ever via the council systems. We're not expecting a fire alarm this morning, but if the fire alarm goes off, we will all follow Alan out of the door. Can I ask all members if you are referring to page numbers in the agenda pack, just to clearly state which page you are referring to? There are a couple of supplements. So supplement 1 contains agenda item 7, which is the pension fund audit findings report. Supplement 2 contains the main report for agenda item 8, which is the strategic risks and high scoring tactical and operational risks for Q1. Which unfortunately didn't upload properly when the agenda was published. And then supplement 3 are the public questions. Okay, so moving on. Yes, Sue?
Chairman, I don't know whether it's just me. It probably is, but I can't seem to find the minutes from the last meeting.
You won't, because they haven't been finished yet. That's what I was just going to come on to.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for preempting you.
No, it's okay, Sue, no problem. So starting with apologies for absence, I've got Lindy, our independent member, Councillor Lee Baker, Councillor Dawn Denton, who is online, I understand. Morning, Dawn. And Councillor Susanna Hart. Liz?
Apologies from Councillor Simon Carswell, who's working today.
Yeah.
Chair, I'm also online as well. Councillor Andy Sully.
No problem, Andy. Nice to see you. Any other apologies that anyone's aware of? No, perfect. Oh, Scott Waldridge is on holiday at the moment. Apparently we have to let him have some of those sometimes. So moving on to item 2, which are the minutes from the last meeting. As discussed, they aren't quite ready for publication yet, so they will be published in due course and we'll discuss at the next meeting. Okay. So moving on to item 3, which is our standing declarations of interest from any members. Anything which isn't already available via your public declarations. Okay, moving on to item 4, which is public question time. So firstly, I have Mr. David Orr, then Mrs. Brenda Orr, and then Mr. Andrew Lee. I've agreed that each speaker will have their standing 3 minutes to introduce their question. All members of the committee have received a full written copy of the questions. So your time will start when you begin to speak. Sue?
Excuse me, Chairman, but we had sent round a chair's timetable, and on the chair's timetable, it had that the questions, because they are specifically relating to an agenda item, would be asked at the time of that agenda item, and that's something that historically has happened. So I'm curious to know why the questions are being asked right now at public question time when they actually relate to agenda item 10, and it may have been better for us to hear them then. I just want to know your thoughts on that.
No, that's fine, Sue. So I made the decision over the weekend that actually it would be discussed as part of public question time. The reason for that being is we have a public question time for a reason. If we pepper the questions through the agenda, it makes it more difficult for me as chair to maintain management of the meeting and to make sure we stick to time. So that's my decision. So within the chair's discretion. So I'm using my discretion to handle it in that way. Okay. Okay, so Mr. Orr, your 3 minutes will start when you begin your question.
This ailing council self-declared a financial emergency almost 2 years ago. That should mean tight financial controls and no tolerance of poor procurement practices to ensure every pound of taxpayers' money is carefully spent. It's reported today that purchase orders are not consistently used across the council. Only 70% of transactions are compliant. This means almost 1 in 3 purchase orders are non-compliant and presumably do not have three-way matching between the purchase order, the delivery note and the invoice. Why is this still happening over 2 years after this new council was formed? Does it increase the risk of fraud and or corruption? Why is the corporate accounts IT system MS Dynamics reported as red? And then a bit later on, procurement rules are not always followed across the council, leading to significant numbers of breaches and waivers. The audit has identified that there is minimal guidance and no centralised training programme available for commissioners and the officers supporting the commissioning process. Contract management training was due to complete by June, but is only 53% complete. Then we come on to Grant Thornton's 2 red card statute recommendations that made back in January. SR1, executive leadership team to formulate a transformation and savings programme that's aligned to meet the budget gap forecast over the period of the MTF, basically 26-27 to 29-30. SR2, the council is committed to developing a clear and robust transformation plan that delivers savings beyond 25-26, but also identifies the activities, actions and initiatives necessary to achieve savings in future years. Both of those were due for completion in June. This is at the top leadership level of this council. One is 20% complete and the other 60% complete. Does the last resort hiring of expensive consultants at a cost of up to £20 million count in the 20% completed task or the 60% completed task? Children's Services reports that key service baselining work, which the former county council should have handed over, was due for completion by March, but that is only 80% complete. Does that mean that taxpayers will be paying for expensive consultants to carry out basic in-house work? Are there other frontline services also without service baselines? Why is the chosen unitary revenues and benefits NET IT system, the one for all districts to use now, reported as red? How much of the 46 million in unpaid council tax is now expected to be collected? In a private sector organisation, these serious deficiencies in financial management would not be serially tolerated. Why are they tolerated in this council? Where is the sense of urgency commensurate with the risks of Section 114 bankruptcy? And finally, Chair, should this council now declare a leadership emergency? Written answers, please.
Thank you. I did have a Nicola giving. So Councillor Lation, I think, was giving an organisational response.
So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Orr. So for question 1, I'm just checking that I'm on the right questions because we have two lots of questions from you today. So question 1 response. The committee is always keen to comply with transparency requirements and openness. Over the last 18 months, the approach to openness concerning waivers and breaches has improved, with a report taken quarterly to Audit Committee and an annual report published.
Over the weekend, Mr. Orr has dropped the August question in favour of a written response.
Okay.
So we are just answering the second set of questions. So that is.
So I start again with thank you for your questions, Mr. Orr. So am I now on purchase order compliance? So improving purchase order compliance remains a priority for the council. We are transparently reporting current performance to highlight both the challenges and the progress being made. We recognise the increased financial risk and are actively addressing it through system improvements, training, clearer accountability, and importantly, because we wish to ensure our suppliers are paid promptly. Microsoft Dynamics is reported as red to reflect the need for better reporting functionality. This does not indicate a failure of the system itself, but highlights the need for enhancements to support more effective financial oversight and compliance. So your other questions, September questions, will be responded to in writing along with the August questions that are held over until today. My apologies for my misunderstanding there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. So moving on to Mrs. Brenda Orr. Hello, Mrs. Orr. Your 3 minutes will start when you begin speaking. Thank you.
The controversial Life Factory project in Glastonbury is on pause and being instigated by the internal auditors SWAP. I note that SWAP was due to report this in June, but that has now been pushed back to December. Does this audit committee know the reason for the delay in reporting on the Life Factory now by December, and was that delay approved by this committee? If not, who approved the delay? Note, Executive Councillor for Finance, Procurement and
Sorry, Mrs. Law,
Performance.
I'm going to stop you with this particular part of your statement because it is out with the council's normal policy for managing conflicts of interest. No declaration of interest. So Councillor Leishon, just to be clear, was appointed to the Glastonbury Town Deal Board as an outside appointment to this council. As an outside appointment to this council, it is perfectly right and proper that that Councillor Leishon be able to respond and to take part in this conversation. There is no implication that Councillor Leishon has done anything other than serve her best and proper endeavours to support the work of this council and that organisation. So please, can I ask you not to refer to that sentence in your statement?
Okay. When is the options appraisal expected to be completed, and will that be publicly published? Given that this will evaluate the value for money, VFM, from the actual work delivered, then will the external auditor include this in the 2024-25 value for money opinion? Where local contractors have carried out work and that has been verified as delivered, have they been paid? If not, when will they be paid? Between now and the final report from SWAP mid-December, will the Audit Committee receive updates, accepting that some reports may be in confidential session? The Council and local taxpayers could be left with a loss of up to £2.4 million if the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government, MHCLG, decide that the Council failed in its duties as the accountable authority. When will the Council know whether MHCLG will claw back any of their grant funding? And if they do, how will that be accounted for? Is there a criminal investigation by the police already underway at present? And if so, when is that expected to report? If fraud and/or corruption is at some stage suspected or found, will the external auditor Grant Thornton become involved? Is it prudent, given the reported failings, to allow the Beckery Construction Company, BCC, to continue to be involved? Does BCC have any assets or cash in case of the need for funding recovery by the council? If Red Brick Building cannot fund outstanding debts and redundancy pay concerned with BCC, then will the council and local taxpayers assume liability as the accountable authority? Could I have written answers, please?
Thank you, Mrs. Orr. I think Nicola Hitz and Liz Leishon are available to give a verbal answer in the interim.
Thank you, Chair. I'm able to give an answer to Mrs. Orr's first two questions. So the options appraisal will be completed in October and included as an appendix to a report to Executive. This document will not assess value for money on past work, but will outline future options for the Life Factory site. Somerset Council has no liability for the creditors of Red Brick Building Centre Limited. Under the grant funding agreement, Red Brick Building Centre Limited is responsible for paying its creditors, and local contractors must seek payment directly from that entity. Beyond that, I understand that a third party has referred the situation regarding the Red Brick Building Centre Limited's Life Factory project, which is a part of the Glastonbury Town Deal, to the police for investigation. In such circumstances, it would not be appropriate to comment at this stage so as to avoid prejudicing any actions the police may instigate. And we will be responding to you in full in writing, Mrs. Orr. Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Lee, your 3 minutes will start when you begin speaking.
Thank you, Chair. Some of what I was going to say has already been anticipated, so I will try and abbreviate as much as possible. My first question, which I'd like to ask through you, Chair, to the external auditors, is how will they be able to sign off on the audit of the Council's accounts for 24-25 without a going concern qualification, given that that sign-off will have to be by the 27th of February next year. As you've already heard, statutory recommendation number 1 on developing a savings plan due 30th of June, 3 months late, 20% complete. Statutory recommendation number 2, 60% complete, due by 30th of June. Both statutory recommendations are critical to Somerset Council being able to form a balanced budget for 26-27. Children's Services were meant to have identified savings and implemented actions on them by 30th of April. This task is only 80% complete. And as you've heard, the Council is not using purchase orders for 30% of purchases. Whilst acknowledging that the breaches and waivers report is in the public domain and there has been considerable improvement in our access over the past 12 months, the last breaches and waivers report had 10 items on it from memory. I stand to be corrected on that. If there are 30% of all purchases are not going through a purchase order system, how can the breaches and waivers report only have 10 items on it? How reliable are these reports on financial performance? How can there be robust systems in place to ensure budgets will be met going forward if the purchase order system is regularly ignored? Given all the above, I'd like to understand how the auditors can satisfy themselves that even if enough savings are identified for 26-27, that they will actually be achieved. My second question related to Glastonbury Life Factory. You've already discussed with Mrs. Orr the situation with the report being delayed by 6 months. I had 3 other questions to ask. Are there any staff left at Beckery Construction Company? Are any project management staff left at the Red Brick Building? And as the project has identified no match funding, most of the 2.85 million allocation of town deal money has been spent. Can anyone explain how they can envisage the project going forward at all under any circumstances? Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Lee. So I've got an organisational response from Councillor Lashon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Lee, for your questions. Given the length and complexity of your questions, we will provide a full written response. I'm confident that our external auditors, Grant Thornton, whose professionalism I hold in the highest regard, will address the specific question on going concern as they complete the 2024-25 audit. And I'm sure if they wish to respond within this meeting to Mr. Lee's question, then that is up to you, Chair, to invite them, not to me. Grant Thornton, of course, are fully aware of the statutory timeline and the government's wider concerns about audit timeliness. We welcome the government's funding to strengthen audit capacity nationally and note that, unlike many councils with multiple years of unresolved accounts, Somerset Council has only 1 year with a disclaimed opinion. I also want to recognise yet again the work of our audit committee, chair and committee, and our staff for completing 11 sets of accounts since vesting day. It is important to stress that we are making significant progress on statutory recommendations, strengthening our control framework and implementing the necessary actions and resources. While some milestones have taken longer than planned, we now have a clear programme with strong governance and oversight. Financial planning and monitoring have been reinforced, and we are tightening compliance on purchase order usage to ensure transparency and reliability, and also ensuring prompt payment to our suppliers. So we continue to work closely with our auditors, providing regular updates and clear evidence of progress. On question 2, Chair, as I responded to Mrs. Orr, it would not be appropriate to comment further at this stage so as to avoid prejudicing any actions the police may instigate. And so our written answers will also take that position into account. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The more observant among you will notice that Barry Morris is not in the room today. So Barry did actually send his apologies to me and I forgot to mention them earlier on. David or Julie, are you happy to respond to Mr. Lee's question, which is directed to the external auditors, please?
Yes, thanks. Thank you very much, Chair. Julie Mashey, I'm one of the audit directors within Grant Thornton. Just in the context of going concern, for auditors within the public sector, we're required to follow the requirements of international auditing standards, and specifically in relation to going concern, there is a specific adaptation to the normal going concern principles under Practice Note 10. And Practice Note 10 starts with the presumption that all public sector bodies are a going concern, because it requires formal statutory legislation to effectively abolish or reconfigure an organisation. But that notwithstanding, as part of the work that we do, specifically as part of the value for money side of things, we conduct detailed work around the council's arrangements of ensuring financial sustainability, and the council will already know from the progress report that's within the papers today that we have previously issued both statutory and key recommendations in relation to the council's financial sustainability arrangements. So just to give Mr. Lee assurance that we will absolutely cover the financial sustainability considerations as part of our value for money work, and that will be continued to be reported through to this committee between now and the statutory deadline.
Thanks, Julie. So just a note to reinforce the statement that Councillor Leishon gave earlier on, as the council is now aware of a third-party referral to the police. Any public discussion around this item does carry a potential risk to any ongoing work. Please can all members make sure that if they are going to refer to that work, that that you are certain that it's not going to cause either yourself or the authority any potential action, any long-term repercussion. We do have legal advice available online. We do also have our monitoring officer in the room. If anything does stray into territory which is potentially risky for the authority or for individual members, I will do my best to intervene, but I would ask you to assure yourself before you make statements which potentially may cause a problem for yourself or for the authority. Alan, as monitoring officer, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Nothing, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to move forward to item 5, which is progress against the auditor's annual report for 2023-4, starting on agenda pack page 11. Sue?
Chairman, I find it rather, I wouldn't necessarily say concerning, but that was quite a lot to absorb in terms of whether we should be asking something or not. Is there an option here, if necessary, to go into confidential?
I'm not in a position to give you any more information, so even if we were to go into a confidential session, there's nothing that I can add at that point, Sue.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to item 5, agenda pack page 11. So I have Sian Kenny. Sian available? Not seeing Sian, her chair's vacant. Sarah, Sarah Hawkins. I'm in Sarah Hawkins. Sorry, it looks like you've been dropped in it, Sarah. I'm sorry.
I'm online. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm online for the risk item, which is item 8. And I will pop down for item 8.
I think Alan's volunteered you to stand into the. Oh, that's fine if you want to do Sean's, Liz, you can do that.
Chair, I am not in Sean's league. Neither am I in Sarah Hawkins' league for their incredibly diligent and detailed work. And I am hugely appreciative that we have both of them working in this organisation doing the work that they're doing. I think the thing that I can say that might be most helpful to members, because I have heard from at least one member of the audit committee, is their confusion about the appendices A and B, C and D, and E and F. So I always have to remember it as SKI, statutory key and improvement. And the appendices are for those that are completed and then those that are in progress. So we have 2 appendices for the statutory recommendations, and then 2 for the key recommendations and the 2 for the improvement recommendations. I think where we're most interested, Chair, all of us as members of this council, are in where we are making progress to move us from phase 1 of our transformation programme into phase 2 of the transformation programme, and where we have now a transformation partner. But this is, at the moment, we're looking back at the work we've done, and for members like myself and my executive colleagues, it is at times difficult to look at papers that are retrospective in nature when we are also at the same time dealing with papers through executive and indeed full council that are forward looking in time. So I'll not comment on the ones that are showing as 100%, but I would like to say on the statutory recommendation SR1, the detailed savings plans to deliver the savings targets in the MTFS. So we have 20% showing for the period from 26-27 through to 29-30. And we have already, since Mr. Heafy joined us as interim section 151, started now looking a year ahead to 30-31. So that 20% is for the period of the MTFS. So Mr. Heafy will correct me if I have any of this wrong. As I've told you, I'm not Sean Kenny. But that 20% is for that whole period. And then the statutory recommendation 2, the overarching transformation business case and the detailed business cases. So now that we have our transformation plan, Inspiring Innovation, now that we have, and somebody correct me please if we are still in the standstill period of appointment of the transformation partner. Are we, can the monitoring officer tell me whether we are through that period now, please?
Through you, Chair. So standstill has now been completed and we are on track to move into contract signing, hopefully by the end of this week.
Thank you very much, Chair. So forgive me for looking ahead instead of sticking completely to the script in this paper. We have an executive on Wednesday and we have already had at corporate and resources scrutiny the data and AI paper that is coming forward, that for me is the bridge between transformation phase 1, where we've done the transform software in children's, working with partners, including the police, where we've done the Homes and Horizons work, where we've done the work with Newton Europe on My Life, My Future, and many other things, where we're now heavily into the move to the NEC software for all of Revs and Bens, and scrutiny will have another update on that. So although it may look as if 60% at this and the due date of the 30th of June, we have clearly taken the decision not to change the due dates, but to leave them as they went into this programme. But I can assure members of this committee that a huge amount of progress has been made through this summer, and we will see the results of some more of that on Wednesday at Executive. So on the key recommendations, Appendix C is those that are completed. And I'm very glad that we have Idea Gen, both here for performance and for risk. And members may be interested to know that the early origins of Idea Gen were a piece of software that was developed by a company in Taunton, which is now a national company. And then we have Appendix D, which are the key recommendations and the actions in progress. Again, Chair, we have the deficit management plan, which you will recall has been to Executive, a revised deficit management plan that has taken a huge amount of work from Children's and Finance, and where we're really grateful to Children's Scrutiny for giving that a really good one-item agenda meeting. And then the Ombudsman, we have had reports, and this is the Performance Risk and Budget Board has been hearing not only of the significance of coordinating with the Ombudsman, but also the plans that we have in place through additional staffing to get that moving more quickly. So again, I'm looking to assure you as committee that there is a great deal of work going on there too. Appendix E, the improvement recommendations are the completed actions. Appendix F, the Children and Family Services Directorate, my colleague sat next to me, Councillor Shearer, and I work really closely together because Children's and Finance and the way they work together is absolutely crucial to the future of this council. And then supporting data and process, again, we will see more at Executive on Wednesday of this week of the work that is going ahead there. So, Chair, I hope in my way, as a member rather than as an officer, I give you some assurance that there is a massive amount of work going on and that it is really working at some pace now. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm going to bring Clive in and then I'm going to go to Gwyl for a question.
Thank you, Chair. Just to try and put some flesh on the bones there as well. So clearly the statutory recommendations are the ones that I focus on coming into the organisation as being the critical ones to deliver. We're working our way through both aspects of both recommendations, but these will take time to deliver. They're not quick things to do. Local authorities up and down the country are struggling with their finances at the moment. We were expecting and hopeful of government announcing the settlement for local government early this year. That's now been pushed back into its normal late December timetable. We're still hoping for a 3-year settlement rather than the one, but that's not yet been confirmed. There's still a lot outstanding in terms of the fair funding review. We know that's in the ether, and we've got some initial proposals, but we're waiting responses now to consultation on that. So until we get that, we won't know the effects on Somerset Council. We need to talk to government about policy around exceptional financial support and council taxes. Obviously, with a new minister and new Secretary of State, government are also waiting at the moment to find out the new ministerial direction. So I'm painting a picture for you. We're trying to pull these plans together in a difficult financial time for Somerset Council, undoubtedly, but also at a time of great uncertainty as well about the future financial position of local government. Indications are that the host department, the Ministry for Communities and Local Government and Housing, are likely to have real terms cuts in their budget going forward as part of the last spending announcement. So unless the Chancellor allocates more into that department, we're looking at a cake which is constantly shrinking in real terms, and therefore we're trying to get our share of the cake from that. So we're preparing the budget. The draft consultation will come out for the 3rd of, to go to consultation on the 3rd of December. We're in the process of preparing that at the moment and looking at all of the budgetary actions that we can take. But the point you'll hear me say quite often is, as a council, we need to get our spending down to the level of our income, and it's above that at the moment. So we still have tough decisions to make. In terms of transformation, clearly we've now got the transformation partner on board. That process was delayed for a number of technical reasons, but that partner is now on board. Nonetheless, we've set up already the transformation process, the governance and the rhythm of the cycle. We've seen now a number of business cases coming through for approval. So that process is also well underway. Is it where I'd like it to be? I don't think it's quite anywhere where all of us would like it to be. We'd love to be in a more balanced position now, but that work is underway at some pace now. So I'm confident in terms of those. Happy to take questions on any of the other items in there as well.
And over to Will for the first question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, this doesn't read very well, I'm afraid, certainly from my perspective. It's difficult to know how to formulate questions because we've had some explanation of where we are and how we got here. So I think what I'll do is I will just express as a member of this committee the concerns that I particularly have. In terms of statutory recommendation 1, developing detailed saving plans at pace. I mean, both statutory declarations, I think, statutory recommendations were, I think, in the public domain in January this year. Both of these were due for completion by the 30th of June. One is at 20%, and the narrative says there's further work to dive deeper into identified growth and pressures are being explored. So we're 3 months behind, and we're still looking at what we're going to do. Due to the second one, we've appointed the business partner in the transformation case, and yet we've got 6 months of this financial year left. So it doesn't strike me that we've got an awful lot of wriggle room. And there's a specific question I'd like to ask Mr. Heapy at the end. There was a strange one in there, KR2, about the children's services, which was accelerating its response to the 2025-26 budget setting process, which was due on the 30th of April this year. I'm wondering whether that was a typo, whether it was the, but it's at 80%. I didn't quite understand what the reference was to. 9, KR9, robust procurement and contract management processes should be embedded. We've heard in the questions, I come from a sort of public service background, and I find it very difficult to accept that you can buy things without a purchase order. If you're bringing a new system in, it should be covered by super users who know how to work the system, who will support the procurement officers. And for us to have orders still going through, I would really like to know how this is being managed internally, because we have 53% for training the contract managers. So I'd quite like to know when the date is to have everybody trained, and then this doesn't start recurring. This has been a theme ever since I've been on the audit committee for the last 18 months. And the question, I suppose, is I was going to ask for Mr. Heapy, was using a sort of maritime analogy. We seem to be on a lee shore. We're in a ship with the wind blowing onto the shore. The rocks are over there. We're not making enough headway in order to prevent the sideways drift, and we've got 6 months left. So I would like to know from Mr. Heapy, at what point is he likely to be in a position, or we'll have to, shall we say, that's probably a better question, make a decision on whether we are financially viable going forward. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll bring Clive in on Will's specific question or anything that you want to respond to, and then Alan on the transformation elements of that.
Chair, through you. On the specifics of the budget, the council, of course, set itself in March a legally balanced budget, which it was duty bound to do. And that was through a lot of hard work, and that included around £54 million worth of savings to be achieved these years, some of which were in the Children's Services Directorate, and a further £4.5 million which hadn't been saved the previous year to be brought forward, so a total of £59 million. We are tracking those savings very closely to make sure they are on target and will be delivered. At the moment, we've got around 6% that have been delivered and around 81% that are on target. The rest we're working. You know the figures around that. The question then becomes for this year, setting the budget. We're in the process now of setting the budget, and I wouldn't expect to have set one at this stage in the year. So I'm looking very closely at all the components of the budget, the income that we get, the expenditure that we get, and how we're managing that before I make a judgment. We're also in discussions with MHCLG about where the landscape lies. As you know, we had 2 years of exceptional financial support following vesting. We're not the only authority doing that, though. There's been quite a number of authorities in that position, and I would expect there still to be a number of authorities in that position going forward. But nonetheless, we know what our task is. What we weren't able to do last time was to balance the medium-term financial position over a 4-year period. And my aim this year is not just to balance the legal requirement to balance a 1-year budget, but I'm looking to see that we can balance our budget now over a 4-year period and demonstrate to ourselves and to government and to the auditor that we are a financially sustainable body. And that's the aim of what we're trying to do. When we talk about transformation, Alan may say a little more in a moment, but when we talk about transformation activities are typically not 1-year things. They're 2-year or 3-year or 4 years before you see the full effect of those. So I'm looking at a combination of generating further income, of cutting costs to fit our income levels. And that does mean all members taking very difficult decisions about services which you may find precious to you, but which you may have to cut or even cease completely in order to balance the budget. And transformation in that mix, some of which may be delivered in 2026-27, the next budget year, but some of which may go out over the next 2 or 3 years before they get delivered. So it's about balancing the in-year versus the longer term is what we're trying to do. I will be in a position, I would suggest, as we go into the new calendar year, to take a view on this council's financial position until I get a settlement from government, which I do not expect until the week leading up to Christmas break. I really won't. It always does. I've never known it be later than that, but it was promised this year in early November. It's now been pushed back again to late December. So that factor is really important for us in terms of determining government policy and our resources going forward. So complex mix of things.
Thank you, Chair. And just to follow what Clive has said, it's quite clear that as part of the transformation approach, it wasn't simply about fixing an issue for next year's budget. It was about creating a long-term sustainable plan. And we've been very clear through every step of the work that we've done since April, particularly around, first and foremost, setting out a very clear transformation plan. So setting out the visions and the objectives of transformation, so that not only that was clearly understood and endorsed in terms of a political direction, but also ensuring that then officers who are responsible for developing those business cases can bring them forward with a clear view of what was expected, the scope, scale and range and type of transformation that will be coming forward in Somerset Council. The next stage to that was to ensure that we had enough capability and capacity to be able to deliver that, and hence why we then proceeded with the procurement of a transformation partner. That's not to do to, but to do with a number of key service areas. So we have the capability and capacity to push at the pace that's recognised in both the statutory recommendations. I think the final point I'd add is that transformation didn't stop in April. It continued. A number of business cases were being developed and were developed and actually were during implementation. Part of this is ensuring that there was continuing rolling programme of those business cases coming forward. We are seeing, as represented in this report, business cases coming through and addressing some of the key pressures and challenges in children's services. We're seeing business cases come forward in relation to the improvement in how we use and deploy data to inform and shape how services are being developed. And of course, one of the critical parts, and it's absolute to support everything that Clive has just said, is one of the key elements and deliverables as part of our work with our strategic partner, Newton Europe, is to develop an early diagnostic that can feed into the budget proposal. But that is not just about fixing next year's issue. It's about creating that long-term sustainable plan that Clive has referenced. So that diagnostic work is intended to not only validate the proposals that we brought forward and we had suggested as a council that are in the rear, Appendix C from memory of the transformation plan. It's also about ensuring that they can also bring their expertise, their advice and guidance on where else we could look as a council to solve what is a considerable budget gap, but one that can be solved. Thank you, Chair.
Wrong button, Will.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I asked about the procurement thing. I mean, the procurement thing in a way is quite important, because I really don't understand how you can exercise budgetary control if you don't know what's going out in real time and it gets journaled in later. It strikes me, particularly in the situation we're in, that's going to make seeing our current position, which is very important, very difficult. And the other point, I just say 6 months.
Clive?
Yes, and we take that extremely seriously as well. So obviously we report regularly to this committee on the waivers and breaches, and that's important that we do. Let's be clear that waivers are perfectly allowable. There are situations like where there is only one supplier and you can't go out to a tender situation because there is only one supplier for the specialist work that we need. That is called a waiver. That's perfectly legitimate and it's within procurement rules. So we need to be clear about waivers, what they are, and there will be legitimate waivers all of the time for those kind of reasons. Breaches are the ones that worry me and that concern me. This is where people have not got a purchase order because, as Mr. Orr referred to, three-way matching, the term that Mr. Orr himself used, is an important process for the council. It means that by raising a purchase order, we're able to see that we can expect a payment, therefore we can forecast a payment, therefore the forecast accounts become better quality by doing that. It's not about the need to spend. We're not questioning any of these spends, should it have happened or not. It should have happened. It's the process by which we do it to make sure, A, that we're getting value for money, B, that we've got a control against fraud, which is a correct one as well, but C, that we've got the visibility in the system. So we are writing to all suppliers against surely all of our suppliers to say you should not supply anything without a purchase order, and if you do, we'll be looking at your payment terms, and you as suppliers should do that. We're also looking at further training for staff internally and putting in place a 3 strikes and you're out process. If you continue, if you do this once as an individual, your manager will take you to task over that one, educate you, help you to learn the process. Second time will be a bit stricter. Third time will take you off the system, and the manager will have to think about alternative ways for getting that procurement done properly without a breach. So this is to put a little bit of stick alongside some of the carrot that we've done already.
As I recall, Will, from Paul Skewes' previous appearances at this committee, some of the breaches are things for which a waiver could have been granted had the waiver been requested before the event. So some of the breaches are technical in nature and perfectly allowable. They just show as breaches because they weren't requested in advance of the event. So, I think sometimes there's a really technical there are technical provisions in there which we need to be aware of, that at face value, if you look at the number of breaches on paper, it looks a lot worse in reality. But happy to be corrected if you want to go back.
Far be it from me to correct the chairman. No, I think I understand that the waiver and breaches and that kind of thing. I think the thing that was really bothering me was the information in the system, which is generated when you set up the order and the purchase order goes out. That's the real-time information that Mr. Heapy needs, and if he hasn't got it, or if it's journaled in 6 or 8 weeks later, then there is a problem in my view. And this is why I was saying that actually perhaps the whole procurement thing should be embedded in a few people and then gradually spread out so that we get it right all the time. Anyway, I'll leave it at that, but thank you.
Reading ahead to the internal auditor's report later on, actually one of the things that I was going to request is that some of the directorates where this isn't standard practice actually come to audit committee to explain the reasons that isn't being followed. So that's fully my intention when we get there. Sue.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And I have to say, I support very much what Councillor Wren has said. I think we're all really concerned. But it's all well and good thinking about the long term and putting plans in for the long term, but we have to ensure short-term survival, because we have to make savings of around 45 million here and now for 25-26. And we're looking at 101 million for 26-27. If we don't achieve that, we're going to be in real trouble. And it's interesting to note that there are persistent problems. It keeps coming up, and it will come up in other reports, that there are problems with procurement and contract control, commissioning. So surely this should be accelerated as a priority. And if we go on to the next one, I'll leave it till then. But when you see that virtually all our systems are red, in fact, they've got more red lights flashing than you'll ever find in a red light district. Something seriously
I'll
wrong.
take your word for that, Sue.
I used to live very close to Bradford, and there was a very notorious lane there. I didn't go, but I think certain gentlemen did. But let's not detract from this. We are in a very serious hole. And and how we get out of it. And I'm not sure that transformation in the short term is going to deliver it, because you're going to be looking at savings. And there's nothing I've seen in any of the transformation papers to quantify the whole cold hard cash we need to save, whether that's in demand management or here and now, I don't know. But we do have those short terms. And the other risk is that, yes, we've got our accounts in time for the moment. That's great. But if our IT and financial control weaknesses are there and our valuations are there, what's the risk that we could have material misstatements or qualifications of unresolved? Because we're still in the process of valuing the assets for, I think it's the consolidated companies. And we know what problems there've been valuing the battery systems, because that's haunted South Somerset. Those are my concerns, that without those controls, and also, I don't know whether it's this report or the next one, it also indicates that we're slipping back on the key requirements we need to do, that those seem to be increasing as opposed to decreasing. And on a sector-wide basis, Grant Thornton have actually noted that other councils are strengthening their controls, transformation planning, internal audit, KPIs, and that possibly we risk falling behind sector standards. So how are we going to address all those things? And what are we going to do? And also a final point, we are likely, I suspect, to be having to go for ESF yet one more time for this year. What is the likelihood, and should it be on the risk register, of the likelihood of what happens if we do not get that, and government says no?
Right, so there's quite a few things in there. So Clive, if I ask you to address the audit related financial matters, Julie or David, are you happy to pick up the internal control matters there, or is that something that you're able to do? Yep, that's fine. We'll start with Clive.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we look all the time to make sure we have appropriate controls in place for the organisation. They need to be tight enough to assure that we've got proper control, that we're demonstrating value for money at all times. Best value is one of the key things that we have to deliver. But they have to be appropriate enough so that people can do their job and do it properly. And we look at that balance the whole time. As a CFO, I look at things like establishment control, our people side of things. How do we control our people, the number of people, the pay bill, etc., because that's one of the biggest areas. So I'm working very closely with the head of HR over what we call establishment control to get that right. We're looking very much at procurement controls, but actually it's not so much this process end of the POs that matters. It's what are we actually commissioning, what are we procuring at that end of things that's causing some of the issues for us. And even with 100% compliance, it's not going to eat into £100 million bill by any means. I don't think that's going to be an answer to the problems. There's, we may find small amounts in there, but this is more about process and knowledge and awareness. So we continue to look at that framework and how that operates. We look at our buildings and how we operate our buildings. We look at our treasury costs and how we're controlling treasury costs and managing those. Those are four key components of local authority controls that we continue to look at to make sure we're getting the best value in all of those and delivering the best quality services that we can, but within the resources available. Will we need exceptional financial support this year? I don't know yet, so I'm going to defer that answer until later on, until I've got a budget to look at. But we are in discussions with government about the future of exceptional financial support as a system, and about above referendum level council tax increases or any other vehicles that government may be looking at. it is likely that there will be double-digit figures, local authorities again going to governments and seeking some kind of support. We may be one of those still. We're still in a transition phase, and others may be going as well. I don't think we'll be alone in this. But as I said, until we know government policy and the new minister's policy now on exceptional financial support and the like, we simply can't comment on where we're going to be. But we have active discussions with MHCLG, and I met with a couple of their senior officials week before last just to go through, what our finances are looking like and where we might be. So it's on government's radar. Clearly, just to finish off, if I may, clearly what government will be looking for us to do is to balance our budget over the medium term. They recognise the challenges that we've had post vesting day coming together, bringing 5 authorities together and making sense of all of that, joining all the systems together, the cultures, the processes. That's recognised in government that takes time to sort out for us and for every authority that's been through that same kind of change. These take time. So what government will be looking for is that medium-term position, Councillor Osborne. So whilst the legal requirement is for a 1-year budget, government will be looking for us to balance that budget over the medium term, even if there's still a journey to go on to get to that. And that's where my focus has to be over the next few months.
The other bit I'll ask, sorry.
Sue, I'm just going to bring the external auditors in to answer the questions you raised over, I think it was internal controls.
Yes.
Yeah. David, did you want Councillor Osborne to restate her
I think that'd be helpful, yeah.
question? Sorry, could you use your microphone, please? So sorry.
Gosh, sorry, I just switched it off to make sure it didn't buzz. How can I jump in and help? You can't. This is what happens when you fat palm the fingers and there are all sorts of things sneaking onto your phones when you're trying to use them. I think what I was raising as well is that for things like financial sustainability and overall risk, it's the controls which are still showing high risk, deficiencies in asset valuation, schools funds and other things. And it was basically as well, just going a bit higher, see where it was those short-term failures where if we don't get those financial IT and finance control results right, it's that risk that you could wind up with material statements, and I don't think we want that either. And also without sort of restructuring, we could wind up getting ourselves nicely destabilised as well. That's basically where I'm going with that, is how quickly and how likely is it that we are going to get those things remedied, bearing where they sit on the where they sit in terms of the progress report.
Yeah, thank you. And some of the questions are more appropriate for management perhaps than the auditors to resolve. I think that the key thing coming out of
I think it's about the risk of material misstatement.
Yeah.
was the primary concern that Sue.
So the key thing is around regaining assurance and the delays associated with the 23-24 accounts. Let's not go over old ground.
Would you bring the microphone a bit closer to you, David? Sorry.
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, that's fine. Just project.
Okay, I was just going to say that the delays regarding the preparation of the 23-4 accounts are well known, so let's not go over old ground. But a key part of regaining the assurance was to produce the accounts for 24-25 in a timely manner, and again the council achieved the statutory deadline for the single entity accounts of the 30th of June and quickly follow that up with the group accounts. So that was a really key part in terms of regaining assurance. There are other authorities around the country that haven't yet produced their 24-25 accounts, haven't got any clear plans as to when that might be. And again, you can see that there's inevitably going to be struggles in terms of those organisations regaining assurance. So I think from an accounts perspective, we are in a reasonable place. The 23-24 accounts weren't audited. Therefore, this year is inherently more difficult. In some cases, there are still legacy systems from the 4 district councils. So if you take, say, like council tax and non-domestic rates, whilst there's plans to consolidate those systems, 24-25 accounts were sourced from 4 separate financial systems. So the work associated with auditing that is much more complicated than it will be going forward. So we are in a reasonable position in terms of the audit. Still a lot of work to do this year, but in terms of could you have done any more to regain assurance this year? I don't think you could have done, to be honest with you, because the statutory deadline was met. We've got a strong and large audit team on the assignment who are working really hard alongside management at the moment. So in terms of regaining that assurance, I think we're in a reasonable position. We mentioned about the asset valuations. So the council has valued its own assets. Oh, council hasn't. Council's got external valuers to value its assets as part of the production of the accounts audit. So the reference to work on valuations is around our audit of those valuations rather than difficulties in the council providing valuations in the first place. I just wanted to clarify where we are on that. We'll come on to our update later on. So if I haven't answered the questions in enough detail then please come back to me as part of that paper.
Thanks, David. Sue, satisfied? Well, perhaps that's the wrong word. Are you?
Well, I'm certainly not satisfied with the overall direction of travel. That, you know, there are some very serious risks ahead for us, and also that it looks as though we're slipping on tackling the backlog that seems to be growing of work in progress, tackling the key reforms and the improvement reforms, that seems to be building rather than shrinking. So, you know, that's going to carry risk as well. It just feels almost as though, I don't know, somewhere along the line slippage has happened and maybe we've not been quick enough to address it and nip it in the bud. And it's taken to this point, and that's what it feels like, for us to suddenly sit up, take notice and say, well, actually, we need to be doing something about this.
Sue,
It's frustrating.
Just to clarify your concern about the list of outstanding actions growing, let me just understand that a little bit. So this is the auditor's annual report for, is it 23-4 that we're looking at? That was a moment in time. We've closed actions down from that outstanding report. We can't add new actions to that report. So in any sense, the assurance gap should be closing at any given moment. And while there's still progress to be made on both statutory recommendation 1 and 2, the authority is making progress towards improving its internal control environment. Am I mistaken? No.
No, Chair. I'm very content that we are making progress, but we need to not conflate progress and risks together. We will always have risks, and new risks will emerge. That's just a landscape that we operate in as a sector and as a more philosophical as a society. So those risks are there. It's how we deal with those risks and how we put the controls in place. I'm very happy with the work that's been done this year under very tight circumstances, but we're continuing to review the processes and the controls constantly to make sure they're fit for purpose and that we address some of these issues. It's an ongoing issue for us.
Okay,
I've got a little bit of a queue now, Sue, so I'm going to move on.
Sorry, I think I possibly jumped ahead to maybe another paper because there do seem to be recurring themes through the different papers. So, but thank you for the explanation.
Right, so I have got, I think Councillor Lation wanted to make a response possibly to Councillor Osborne's statement, and then I've got Councillor Anfabai.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that at a meeting of the executive at Brimpton Way, I declared a financial emergency in November 2023. That is nearly 2 years ago. It is not correct to say that anything is jumping up and biting us at this stage. We acknowledged it very soon after vesting day. We have done a massive amount of work since. Really pleased to hear from the external auditor about where progress has been recognised, and you will, Chair, like all members and all officers here know that we have not pulled back from using the term financial emergency, and until we are able to set a budget without one-off monies in the way of EFS or use of reserves, I am not anticipating a change of terminology in the near future. We continue the good work in a very, very challenging place for all local authorities, not just Somerset Council.
Thanks, Liz. Habib.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I actually ask my question, I'd like a statement to put out. I mean, I tend to concur with Councillor Osborne's concerns. We are in serious financial predicament, hole, as she put it. May I ask who put us in this predicament? It's a genuine question. Years of underinvestment by central governments in all public sectors, I believe. Coming to my questions is, will it help? Certainly would help me to have a column with risks, mitigation and control, early warning signs, and if I can give you an example on resources and capacity check. So that's potentially can actually lay within a risk element. Then regularly review it whether assigned officer have the capacity, skills or support is needed to deliver such service, and reallocate where the services actually is needed, and then early warning signs with indicators that we have indicators currently that we can actually identify pattern of under delivery and specific service areas that we need to sort of concentrate on. So you've got a number of columns that we are all clear what is happening, the mitigation plans, and how do we actually go back there. So it's a continuous thing that can actually take place. I think it would help, certainly would help me understand things a bit better. Thank you for bearing with me.
Thanks, Habib. Alan, yeah, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. So just a very, very brief comment. I can't comment on the start of the question, but I understand that it's been kind of well set out during responses to full council in terms of the budget setting. In terms of the overall style of the report into this item, we will take that away as officers and consider the feedback. I would just state that as part of the strategic risk report, we've gone to great lengths to look at not only the risk description, the cause and the consequence. So when we get to that item, if there are any specific points that the audit committee would like us to take away and consider in terms of those mitigating actions and more clarity, myself, Sarah and colleagues will pick that up, and certainly we can address that. We have flexibility in these reports to do that.
Thanks, Alan. Simon?
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I'd just like to make the point that the work that has gone into preparing these reports is enormous, and we should be very grateful to Mr. Heapy, Mr. Jones, and all the senior officers that have been involved in getting us to this point. It isn't the situation any of us would have wished to find ourselves in, but I think the work that's gone into this, we have to take our hats off to our staff and to our senior officers. And I don't want us to think that they are not working extremely hard to make sure that we do not fall down. And yes, of course, we would like more money. Yes, of course, we would like it to be easier. But the situation is well rehearsed. We know where we are. We know how we're going to get out of it. It's not going to be easy. There will be some tough choices. But I would not wish for one moment for anybody, any member of staff, to think that we were not supportive of them. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. So, failing any other questions, would the committee like to note this, and we can move forward to agenda item 6? Yeah, thank you, everyone. So, moving on to Somerset Council Audit Progress Report and Sector Update and IT Audit Report for 24/5. So, do I have Ben? Is Ben? Oh, hello, Ben. Didn't see you at the back there.
Thank you, Chair. Morning, committee. Chair, if you don't mind, I'll probably defer straight to the auditor. They're going to walk through a series of audit progress updates, which include progress update on the statement of accounts audit, but also their latest publication in terms of the IT audit findings.
Right. So over to you then, David.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. I think there's probably going to be some slight overlap with what I'm about to say compared to responses to previous questions. If there's any questions on the update itself or on my brief presentation, then please feel free to come back to me. Members of the committee will be aware that we presented our audit plan to this committee on the 22nd of May, and that set out the key risks or the significant risks from both the financial statements audit and also the value for money assessment. And a key part of that value for money assessment will be our assessment on the follow-up against the previous statutory and key recommendations that were made in the auditor's annual report for 23-24. As I said, the council prepared its draft financial statements in line with the statutory deadline, and that's a key milestone and a real major achievement in terms of regaining assurance. And given the difficulties of the 23-24, let's not underestimate how much of an achievement that was. The audit's very much underway at the moment. I've set out progress against those key risks. The only update to provide to the committee with is that as far as the management override of controls and our work on journals, at that stage we said that the journals that we'd selected were with management to provide evidence to support that. That's since moved on. That evidence is starting to come through, and my team is working our way through that. But other than that, there's no changes as far as the progress against the financial statements audit is concerned. We're making good progress on the pension fund, and Julie Massey will present to you the audit findings report for the pension fund for 24-25. As far as the value for money assessment is concerned for the current year, that work is underway at the moment, and our plan is to present the interim auditor's annual report to this committee in December of this year, and that report will be finalised once the financial statements audit is completed. As I said, a key part of that will be following up on the previous recommendations that were issued. So that's all I want to say in terms of the financial statements audit. Before I move on to the IT, perhaps it might be an idea to pause and take any questions on that element of our work before we move on to the other issues set out in our update.
Thanks, David. So I'll go to Will first for questions on the financial statement section of the audit.
Yeah, it's just a small one. On page 6, I've noticed that it says that land and buildings revaluations, we've reviewed the procedures completed by management as part of the local government reorganisation to ensure the asset register is complete. I mean, because I think one of the problems with local authorities has always been getting a completed asset register. Can it be confirmed that the asset register of this council is now completed and is robust, please?
So officers to comment on whether it's completed, and I suppose auditors to tell us if it's robust. Ben.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of work and with asset consolidations, that we're working the finance asset register and the property register, making sure that they're consistent. We do that work every year in terms of the valuations. So we value our assets on a 5-year cycle. We have been doing that on a 3-year cycle, which would have accelerated that, but the new CIPFA code regulations state that we should be moving to 5. With part of those valuations, we check across the 2 systems that we have consistent and complete records. So the auditors will be valuing what's on our asset register and looking through our different asset classes, making sure that we classify them correctly, as well as the valuation within each asset class. So I'd say that a lot of work's been done. There's more work that is ongoing between the finance register and the property records.
Okay. So moving on to other questions. Sue?
Yes, we've had Microsoft Dynamics. I think
But
that came in.
That's for the second section of the
This is the
report.
second section. Okay, so you're just
specifically
asking
on the
on
financial statements at the moment.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, right. If there are no other questions on the financial statements, we'll move forward through to the IT report.
Thank you, Chair. So again, members of the committee will recall that we'd fed back to this committee our findings on the 23-24 assessment of the council's key financial systems, and our IT auditors have followed up on the actions that were agreed at that time. So it's a roll forward assessment. We set out on page 8 of my report, page 44 of your pack, the various financial systems that the council's had in place as far as the 24-25 audit is concerned, you will see that that's quite a significant list, predominantly because, primarily because of the legacy systems of some of the district councils. Council has got plans in place, to amalgamate those systems so that going forward that list will be reduced. And you can see there our commentary against each of those. On page 45 of the report, we do set out our risk assessment as far as those areas are concerned. You'll see that the position is unchanged from 23-24 in that our overall conclusion is red in each of those areas, in that our view is that there are deficiencies in place. As far as the audit itself is concerned, we then, primarily as part of our work on journals, will assess whether or not any of those deficiencies did actually manifest themselves in the year. So we've got concerns over super users and segregation of duties, but as far as our audit is concerned, those deficiencies weren't exploited in the year. So the weaknesses do remain, but we didn't actually identify any issues where someone that shouldn't have processed journals, for example, did actually process any financial transactions in the year. So I think it's important for the committee to both acknowledge and recognise the deficiencies that exist, but it's also important to understand that those deficiencies didn't actually manifest themselves during the year.
Okay. I'm going to go to Steve first. I suspect that it's going to be a question about segregation of roles, Steve. It's an ongoing concern for you, isn't it?
Yes. This has now been the third year where separation of duties has come up. Initially, we were told it was a SAP issue and it would be addressed when Microsoft Dynamics came along. Well, obviously it hasn't. So that's an ongoing, how hard do we have to press to get action in this area, substantial action to reduce that? Now, this is thrown into sharp relief today when the BBC show that journalists are being bribed to give away their credentials. So it is a day zero threat at the moment. And if these people have access to the journals or the audits as well, they can cover their tracks. So how can you tell? You say you haven't had any evidence that this has happened, but if they can cover their tracks, there won't be any evidence of it. So this is a critical problem that should be addressed now. Absolutely. And I can't stress this hard enough. Sorry.
So, Andy, I can see you hiding at the back there.
I'm not hiding, but I'm here. Yeah.
No, sorry. Somebody had to sit at the back. Would you like to respond to?
Yeah, I think that it's not just the dynamics; it's across it's also the revs and bends. And as Liz said, we are kind of fixing forward in that area, in that we're shutting down those systems. As Sedgemoor is in progress, Mendip is shut down. So some of the red areas in revs and bends are actually disappearing because the people are leaving the organisation and those systems are being shut down. As far as dynamics go, there were two lines with that. Firstly was the IT team having access higher than they need to do changes. That we've got a mitigation in place where they have to apply for that, and then it obviously gets removed afterwards. So that's a way of removing that kind of admin, enhanced admin access for support people. And we are doing a full review of everyone's access in live and to make sure there is that segregation of duties. So it's a long process, but we are working through it. And there's a new version in Dynamics as well that is helping to speed that up as well. But that only arrived in July, so it is an ongoing issue. But we hope to have that completed by November, because there is a change in the way licensing is happening as well. So we're aligning it to that. Was there any other systems you were worried about? Because is it just the Dynamics, or is it because we are obviously in SAP, it was red as well, and we are moving to the new version of SAP in April as well. So it's kind of, we're not fixing the legacy issues, we are kind of fixing forward. That's the plan, really.
Well, I understand this would be a broad problem across all systems, but it was just that SAP was brought
Steve,
up.
would you mind just speaking to the microphone, just in case people online can't hear?
SAP was brought up in the previous audit and was going to be set aside because MSD was going to address that problem, or the implementation of rights in that system was going to address it. But now we find in that system, we have people with potentially rights beyond their responsibilities. It's a concern again.
Yeah, I get that, but we have addressed some of them. We're trying to address all of them, but it's a long process.
Okay, so sense and share the frustration, Steve. So I think that's a point well made. I think, Andy, will you keep us updated as to where we are in progress
Yes,
with,
yeah.
with this item, because it remains an area of concern to committee, I would say. Right, Sue.
Yes, I think there's another programme we shouldn't forget on here, and that is the NEC, is that Northgate, which was the old South Somerset system. That is read for both IT, GC rating and security management, the same as the other systems. So what steps are being taken to remediate that? And why did we choose to move to a system or put everything onto a system that actually doesn't look any better than anything else that we're already using on there?
Andy?
Yeah, I think that is the legacy configuration of that system. We are moving to a new system that has been reconfigured. We have fed the recommendations from the audit report into the project team, so they're building it afresh with those safeguards in place, and that's what we're moving everything to. So we're not moving it into the old system that has the legacy issues. We're creating a new system that's going to fix those issues, and obviously it's a 4 into 1, so it's a stage process in which we're moving them in. So two of them, one's gone live, one's in the progress of going live. I think it's tomorrow. We then have another one the week after, and then because of the time frame of how council tax works, we kind of have to have a pause before we finish it all up in April. So again, it's a planned process, and it's something that we're addressing. But you can't. There's over 100 people involved in that project, so we can't go back and fix the old issues because we don't have the resource to do it. Does that make sense?
It does, because it sounds like you're time bound and you've basically got to get this completely done, complete with a pause by I guess March 31st, 2026, so we can go ahead and bill and do all the other things we have to do. Are you going to be sort of doing, I guess, a progress report so we are assured that the work is ongoing and moving forward, and that it will be actually completed by March 31st?
Well, it's going to be April is when we go live, but it's around about that time. Yeah, it will be, and it's on. The first two have gone live or progressed as on track, so we're not expecting any delays in that.
Liz.
Thank you, Chair. We had a really good presentation by Sean Warren, Head of Revs and Bens at Corporate and Resources Scrutiny. I'm in touch with Sean about when he will be able to update scrutiny on progress. There's also something else that we have to take into account, which is the DWP moratorium, where we're not allowed to move to a new system and a new way of working, because of course, as it comes to the financial year end, DWP have important work to do. We have really important work to do, and I'm really pleased to hear from Andy Cannell the same as I saw when I went to Bridgewater House and saw a major part of the team working on this move to NEC, and it is one of the places where I'm really delighted to say that I've seen people from the former district areas of Somerset working really closely together, and where we will in good time now have one team working on one piece of software for the whole of Somerset. So we'll have business as usual progressing much more efficiently. We'll have change because we'll have new cloud-based software that will in itself be more efficient, and we will have terrific opportunities for transformation by having that work. And you'll see on the paper that went to scrutiny and goes to executive on Wednesday how NEC is an important part of all of that data, and I see huge opportunity there. I don't see this as just business as usual and change. I see it as a really important part of our overall transformation, the kind of phase 2. So it all leads towards it. I am really impressed with the work that that big team from across the 4 districts are doing together, and and then it will all, I think I'm right in saying, all the council tax letters will go to print to the same place, which will no longer have in-house printing or printing by Capita that's working on a different timescale. It's a really, really interesting piece of work that is, of course, LGR based, but is actually, we are winding it into our transformation programme really tightly.
Okay. So I guess members need to be able to assure themselves of progress against the deficiencies that have been highlighted here. So will this come back to us at a future meeting? I don't know who's leading on this. Alan?
Chair, if I can offer the committee some advice, I think there are two aspects. One is around scrutiny's role in assessing and making sure that the work that's been completed and set out has been done and done to their satisfaction, and ultimately executives. And then subsequently a final, once that is now complete and installed, then a follow-up audit carried out by the external auditor around the governance issues, which would mean that this naturally wouldn't come back to audit committee until around April, May. But of course, all members will be updated on progress through the scrutiny route.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to move on. Right, do members want a short break before we move on to item 7? So can I ask that we take 10 minutes back at 11:35, please? Thank you. Right, everyone back? Not quite, but as good as we're going to get for the moment, I believe. Sorry, Simon. Right, on to item 7, which is the Somerset Pension Fund Audit Findings Report for 24/5. So I guess, Anton and Julie, this is your moment in the sun.
I'm going to defer straight to Julie, with your permission.
That was short.
Short and sweet. Thanks very much, Anton. Thank you, Chair. So just by way of a bit of introduction, firstly to just explain the respective responsibilities of the different members of the Grant Thornton team. So you've already heard from David today. David and Barry Morris, who isn't with us today, looks after the main Somerset Council audit, and myself and my colleague Macaulay Gulliford, who's on the online call today, is my audit manager, and we specifically look after the work for Somerset Pension Fund. So there's been already a bit of discussion as part of committee day around having some assurance around the fact of whether the council is progressing and making sure it's complying with its statutory timeframes. It's obviously therefore very pleasing that I can come to committee today to give you the findings report for Somerset Pension Fund, which is obviously the first of the two key components of that as far as the 24/25 statutory audit. For the moment, until government decide to decouple the pension fund accounts from the main council accounts, it's all effectively part of one composite document. And so whilst I'm here today effectively saying that we've concluded the work that we need to on the fund, the opinion that goes with that pension fund is signed alongside the opinion that Barry will provide on the main council accounts when that audit is concluded. So we will have a little bit of time to do all the formality of the formal signing once the council work is done. But as you'll see from the audit findings report that is within the papers today, as far as the pension fund is concerned, it's a very positive picture in terms of the audit. You'll see from the appendices to the report, which set out all of the details around the different adjustments required to the accounts. There's no numerical adjustments that have been required to the actual overall position of the pension fund in terms of the net asset statement or the fund account. So financial position wise, unchanged. You'll see a small number of disclosure changes that have been added into the findings report, and that is just to pick up on a number of current live developments that happen out there in the sort of pension fund world. As far as local government pension schemes are concerned, still very active positions going on a number of these things. The first being around a whole raft of governance and restructural changes happening within relation to pension fund pooling. We've just asked management just to include some disclosure to make sure that the very up-to-date position is included in the accounts. We've asked for some additional disclosure around a specific legal case that may have some applicability to LGPS schemes. The government's actuarial department, who act on behalf of the LGPS, are currently working through some assessment as to how much, if at all, that impact will have on the funds. And so, again, we just asked some further disclosure to clarify the current position on that. But outside of that, no significant issues have been picked up as part of the audit. You'll see within the action plan that there are two recommendations we do flag in the action plan. One is around the bank reconciliation controls. That's not to say the bank reconciliation isn't happening. It is. The recommendation is solely around evidence in the review of that reconciliation once it's been completed. And the second one is just a signpost to the detailed IT audit findings, of which David have already taken you through a summary of that for both the council and the pension fund as part of his progress report. So I think, Chair, really just to say an overall very positive picture for the council. As we sit here today, we would anticipate issuing an unqualified, that's a clean opinion, as far as the pension fund is concerned. And particularly, I'd like to put on record my thanks to Anton and colleagues, particularly because, as I said, there's a lot of important stuff going on in pension fund world at the moment that is keeping him and his team very busy. So to be able to achieve this to this time frame really should be formally recorded. So thank you.
I should probably formally record my thanks to you and to Anton for the work that's been put in up to this point. So I'll open to members for questions. Everyone happy? Norman?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I was particularly interested to try and find more out about the breakup of the fund, because the Brunel Fund seems to have done so incredibly well, and here we are being asked to shift, if you like, where we are being invested. What are the benefits of this? How do you see it reflecting? And will it help, if you like, any of our other members within this group?
So not strictly an audit question,
No,
more of a scrutiny question, but I'll allow Anton to give us a very brief price.
It's a general picture that the way ahead.
Do you want a bit of background as well? Quite happy to give it, but
go on then, Anton.
So, for those that don't follow the pension fund particularly closely, in 2015, the government asked local government pension schemes, there are 89 in England and Wales, to coalesce into pools to generate greater efficiencies in the way we invest. As part of that, eventually, the Somerset Fund, in combination with 9 other broadly southwest-based LGPS funds, created a company called Brunel Pension Partnership Limited, which is owned by those 10 funds on an equal basis. And that grew into a company that was managing something in the region of £30 billion worth of assets, had an annual budget in the region of £14 million, and employed, I think it was 80 FTE staff, and based in Bristol. The government started a consultation in October called Fit for the Future for the LGPS. And one of the elements of that was to assess the work of the 8 pools that came out of the previous requirements, to make sure that they were fit for the future, along with a number of other governance upgrades for the funds themselves, which we'll be working on once the government puts in place legislation to confirm what they are. As part of that, the government asked each of the 8 pools to submit a business plan to MHCLG in March. In April, we received a letter from the ministers indicating that they don't believe that Brunel meets their ambitions, and therefore the Brunel Fund, or the underlying pension funds attached to Brunel, should seek a new pool. They also gave the same conclusion to the Access pool, and so there were 21 orphan funds, as we're sometimes referred to, seeking new pools from the remaining 6. And we have completed that process, but our decision is not yet in the public domain, so I will not actually reveal it here. That was taken at a pensions committee in private session just over 2 weeks ago. To your question around benefits, I mean, those of you that have been to pensions committee and heard me talk, in my opinion, there are no benefits to this. Government are acting on a whim. There isn't an obvious reason why Brunel was deficient where other pools that they have allowed to continue. Apologies, someone's trying to ring me. That where other pools that were approved don't meet as good a standard. So I'm as baffled as you as to why Brunel is being broken up. As someone who's worked incredibly hard for 10 years to put it into life and create what it is now, it's somewhat dispiriting that we have to start again with a new pool, but that's what government have told us to do, so we must get on with it. And we will make the best of it and try and make as good a job of it as we've made with Brunel, and hopefully make some savings at some point in the future.
Okay, thanks, Anton. So any questions on the substance of the report? No?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just I understand the sort of transformation that the government is asking us to do, but in terms of liquidity planning and buffer allocations, are you confident that we've got enough enough liquidity to oversee our pensions?
The audit doesn't really address liquidity per se, so that's something for officers to manage. It isn't really a problem. I mean, with the pension fund running the treasury function of that, the outgoings are very predictable, because by far the largest part of the outgoings is paying pensioners on the last working day of the month and paying the associated tax on the 22nd of the following month. That's very predictable and very easy to forecast, and therefore very easy to make sure we have sufficient liquidity to meet it. But also the vast majority of that is met by the receipt of employer and employee contributions from the employers that are connected to the fund, which typically come in on the 19th of each month. So to a large extent, we receive money on the 19th and we pay it out on the 31st. But we do make sure that we plan for contingencies and make sure we have sufficient liquidity at all times.
Thanks. I'm going to move on, if that's okay. Tim?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to join you in extending my thanks to officers and auditors. I think that if all audits read like this, it would be quite an easy job on the audit committee. So thank you very much.
In deference to my colleagues in Somerset Council and elsewhere, our accounts are quite a lot simpler. I think we run something like 80 or 90 general ledger codes. I think the council run about 3,000. So and the number of officers involved are also much smaller. So it is a much simpler piece of work.
Great. So in line with the fact that it's likely to be an unqualified audit opinion report, and it's generally a straightforward matter, are members happy to note this so we can move on? Perfect. Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Anton, for all of your hard work. Welcome, Sarah. Sorry about the premature welcome to the audit committee earlier on today. So moving on to item 8, which is the strategic risks and high scoring tactical and operational risks for Q1.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. And not a problem, certainly kept me on my toes earlier. So this is the first quarterly risk report in line with the new risk approach and framework, which was approved during Q1 and came to Audit Committee in May earlier this year. So as part of that approach, committee will be presented with not just all of the strategic risks, but also now any high scoring tactical and operational risks. So that's any of those risks which currently have a score of 16 or above. You've got quite a few appendices, and I understand not all of those are uploaded, but they're linked via the agenda. Strategic risks are included in Appendix A, and tactical and operational risks are organised by directorate and are included in Appendices C to G. We do have some confidential mitigations in Appendix H related to our cyber risk, and Appendix J contains our risk approach document. Just to cover a few headlines in terms of the activities through Q1, and also to give an overview of the actual risks themselves. So all risk reporting is now generated via IdeaGen. So that's the Council's risk and performance management system. That's enabled us to link those key improvement actions from our external audits and reviews and any other improvement action plans that we hold as an authority. So we're able to link those against our strategic risk profiles and make sure that they're connected in terms of how we are mitigating and managing those risks. Work since April has really focused on getting the new framework in place, resetting our strategic risks with clear ownership and accountability, reflecting our new operational structure that we had in place from the 1st of April, and also lots of work with our directorate leadership teams to make sure that we do have that overview of the tactical and the operational risk profile for the authority, and that those are reflected in IdeaGen. As noted in the report, project and programme risks are not currently included, and that's because the initial work has focused on those other areas. However, that work is underway for inclusion from Q2, and in particular, as we get more business cases for transformation come forward, we will then ensure that obviously the associated risks related to those proposals are incorporated dynamically into our risk reporting. We've continued to capture learning throughout since April as we look to develop and embed a stronger risk management, and you'll note some of those headlines are included in paragraph 6 of the cover report, really aimed at providing greater clarity, in particular on roles and responsibilities, and around risk escalation and how we manage that as well. In terms of the actual risks themselves, we've got 11 strategic risks. You'll note there is one new strategic risk that has been through our corporate leadership team this year. That's Org 011. That's the escalation in the high needs budget pressures resulting from the cumulative deficit. That was previously captured as a tactical risk sitting within the Children and Families and Education Directorate. However, it's really clear that whole council input is required in order to progress those mitigating actions, and obviously the consequence of that risk and not delivering and achieving the deficit management plan would likely result in the council being unable to set a balanced budget due to reserves being insufficient. So really important that that is held as a strategic risk. There are 8 strategic risk profiles that remain the same. Of those, our medium-term financial sustainability remains our highest risk, and I know that's been a subject of conversation this morning. We do have 2 strategic risk profiles that have reduced. One of those is the inadequate management of contracts, leading to financial inefficiencies and regulatory non-compliance. Again, note the conversations this morning around the ongoing work in that area. The reduction here has actually reduced the likelihood from a 5, which is our highest scoring, over 90%, to a 4, which is up to 90%. And that judgment was made to as a reflection of the contract management framework that is now in place and has been approved by our executive, and also the progress made in terms of the forward planning of our contracts and procurement activity, and also the training that is well underway and being rolled out to all of our contract managers. The other one that has reduced is Org 008, which is the insufficient governance and operational arrangements related to counter fraud and corruption. That's deemed less likely to occur, so that's now assessed as a 3, a possible, rather than a likely, a 4, and that follows the significant work around the rollout of the fraud action plan, to ensure that robust procedures for fraud prevention, detection and investigation are in place. So I wanted to note those two, and there's further information in bullets 9 and 10 of the cover report. I'll pause there and invite feedback and questions.
Okay, open to members for questions. So I've got Gwyl first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, clearly there's quite a few risks here that we've already talked about, you know, the cyber attack and clearly the whole financial situation. So I won't go into those. I mean, except to say that on organisational risk 009, which is red, the in-year mitigation progressed to prevent forecast overspends rolling forward into pressures. This is at 10%. Mr. Heapy referred to that earlier on. There's clearly a lot of work going on, but if we're only at 10%, we haven't got much time left. The overspend is 3%, I think, something like that. But clearly that needs to be addressed because any overspend is going to cause us a problem. I won't talk about the town deals. I mean, there's obviously quite a lot of issues with that. What I wanted to mention was the Org 4, inadequate management of contracts leading to financial inefficiencies and regulatory non-compliance. And again, we have this, I need to work out what the relationship is between the procurement staff and the contract management staff, if they are the same or if they're separate, because we have the figures in terms of training for managing contracts seems to be about the same as that for procurement. And clearly there are issues about procurement and doing it properly. But I would argue that if you can't manage your contract properly, then the risks are enormous. Things can go really badly wrong. And so I would like to understand what the relationship is between the two, whether the people doing the procuring are actually then on to manage the contracts, and whether the two, and if that's the case, whether the two roles are being addressed in tandem, or whether it's separated. And if it is separated, then clearly there has to be some kind of, what's the right word, amalgamation, dovetailing. There has to be, it all has to be done at the same pace, because you don't want the thing to be out of kilter. Sorry, that was a little bit of a jumble at the end, but I think you understand my concern.
Yeah, I think perfectly. It's been a consistent theme and thread through today and previous meetings, Will. So it's a point well made. Clive, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, just on that point then. So contract management is a responsibility of the services and the service directors themselves. So requisitioning takes place within the service, i.e. we want to purchase something, which then gets the approval within service and then gets on to become a purchase order and into the system. Similarly, when something comes in to be authorised, the goods have been received, then that takes place back within the system as well. On ones where there's contract management needed, that contract management sits within the service as well. They are trained to do contract management. The procurement team, therefore, acts as a centre of expertise, then able to provide training, advice, guidance, standards, etc. And that's what we need to make sure. So we do put regular procurement training on for colleagues, and we'll continue to do so. And we're about to enter another round of training as part of what I talked about earlier on, reinforcing the need for good quality purchase orders in advance of an order, or sorry, of an invoice being received.
Sorry, can I just clarify that then? We have a procurement team who actually puts all the paperwork together for the contracts, but actually when the contract is let and managed, it's managed by a separate person who clearly needs to know what
it's working together. So
yeah.
So the key point of anything going out to contract is the scope of that contract. That's a matter for the service to determine the scope, and procurement will advise on the wording. But then there's a whole range of standard stuff that gets wrapped around that, which procurement are the experts on. So they make sure that it follows standard process and procedure and follows both the council policy and public procurement rules.
I think what I would say in a sort of final comment to this is, one of the difficulties with running a contract is being what I would call an intelligent client. So actually, in fact, you do need to understand not only how contracts work and what the legal implications are, but you also have to understand fully what it is you're trying to do and how it's being done, so you don't get bluffed. And I mean, I think we've seen HS2 is a classic example where perhaps management aren't entirely on top of what the consultants or their contractors are saying. Anyway, that's by the by. But and that's on a massive scale. But I mean, clearly in the situation we're in financially, we need to be as tight as a drum on all this kind of stuff, because if something goes wrong and we get sued, then it's a problem.
Yeah, it's about legal protection. You're absolutely right, not to get sued, but it's also again about back to best value and making sure that we know the contract terms are in there and we are enforcing those contract terms and challenging them. So it's a really important skill set within local government.
I'm just going to ask a question before I come to Habib, Sarah, and that was around ORG 003, which is the cyber risk. We had quite a long deep dive workshop session after the last audit committee in August, and I'd say not only was I terrified, but I was slightly reassured by the answers that we got during that workshop. But it doesn't seem to reflect necessarily in the risk scoring here. So some of the things that I thought we were doing quite well on in terms of 24/7 provision of incident response, etc., seem to be listed as problems. So I'm just not quite sure how to pass those two things. Either I was overly optimistic after the workshop last month, or the sky's still falling in. I'm not sure which it is.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, I'm pleased that the presentation and the work that went to both kind of demonstrate and reassure you, but also scare you too, in terms of the scope and scale has worked. So thank you for that and that opportunity to kind of present it in that way. I think one of the reasons why both myself and Andy Kennell as the leads for this particular risk are we're concerned about the continually evolving landscape around cyber attack. So as we are addressing these issues and putting things in place, without going too far, we know that the landscape out there is changing quite rapidly. So I think we need to maintain this level of risk, because it also means that we are putting in this an equivalent level of effort into addressing and maintaining it. So we are doing all we can. We are doing more, and we are certainly evolving and adapting using AI tools and the like. But I'm afraid I can't see any change to this risk, given the fact that the environment we're working in is constantly changing.
Thank you. That's helpful. I guess the follow-on question for me is: are we prioritising investment in cyber defence to the right to a level that's commensurate with the changing landscape and emerging risks?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's a critical question, and one of the key things we're doing as part of this year's MTFP round is to reflect that and consider whether we need a greater level of investment as part of the ongoing threats that we're experiencing, the findings of the audit that we have had, some of the new systems that are coming on board. So the team are working that through and are kind of complying with Clive's process around what that looks like in terms of medium-term financial planning, and then we can consider it as part of the overall budget, because it's not our only risk.
No, agreed, and that's helpful to understand. So, Habib.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Potentially a couple of questions on the overview of current strategic risks. I'm pleased to see a tabulated form, but I question our inability to attract and retain investments. Why can't we do this? And I was referring to having various columns with different sort of you've got the risk area, then mitigation and control, rather than just a whole series of color coding and early sort of signs of what is it that we're going to do to reverse that. So I think this is an example that here is an opportunity that we can actually grasp hold of it. But it is through economic development strategies or anything else to attract some wealth creators to come to Somerset and generate wealth, because every pound they create, then the multiples are 3 times as much. So we are missing a trick on this, I think, and we need to actually address that. The other question, perhaps is for Sarah, is how are we sort of doing with NHS coordination, health providers, housing providers? Are we in a position that we are coordinating with all the stakeholders, or if not, when is the timely period that we're looking at bringing all the partners together?
Do you mean bringing partners together in terms of the assessment of our risk, or as a risk in itself? We've recently had a conversation at CLT in September to start to get underway the assessment of what impact the reorganisation of the health system and the dismantling of NHS England will have on us. So that's something that we are exploring with our CLT, and I would expect to see it as part of our risks from Q2 onwards. So those conversations are live and underway, but not yet included. We weren't ready with that one for Q1.
Liz.
I just want to come in at this point, if I may, Chair, to say, as alongside all the risks, there are, of course, opportunities. And I think that's what Councillor Farber-High is referring to, is the fact that we are identifying very clearly where we have risks. I think as we move through into transformation phase 2 and working with our transformation partner, I think that is the point at which we will be looking to present differently, where we have the interplay between performance, risk and budget, and then we will add opportunity through those business cases. And I know that work is already underway. How we demonstrate it to audit, I think, is a really interesting question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. Oh. I was going to put a plug in as well for our performance measures, and we've done a lot of work in terms of bringing in organisational health measures, and actually in themselves they do help us to understand our profile of risk. And in terms of transformation in particular, it was really good recently when I think it was a scrutiny session on the AI and Modern Council business case, and actually a lot of that conversation was focused on risk and opportunity, and I think it really will open up how we look at that opportunity as well as part of that risk picture, and enable us to do that more.
Alan.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to go to the core of Councillor Farber-Hig's comments, really, in terms of the nature of the issues, there are two issues here, aren't there? One is around the role of scrutiny, to look at the function and engagement, and is there a sufficient amount of activity to address the particular risk around wealth generators, using your terminology. I think from an audit perspective, then, is it controlled sufficiently? Are you comfortable and satisfied that the measures that are in place are suitable to address that risk? And I think it's that kind of slightly split element, and that's one of the reasons why this report is here, to kind of give you that opportunity to comment on, are these controls sufficient? And if I've heard correctly, you'd like to see a bit more information on the mitigation measures that are being put in place, the actions and activities, particularly around this one, that you'd like to see, so that you can match the cause, consequence and mitigation. And is that mitigation, are you comfortable and confident the mitigation is appropriate given the nature of that risk? So apologies, Chair, I don't wish to put words into committee's mouth, but that appears to be the thing that I've heard. Do we need to be a bit more clear on the mitigation measures in this report to be able to answer Councillor Farber-Hig's key point there about wealth generators?
Habib, you're happy with that as a response? Right then, any further questions? Sue?
Thank you, Chairman. I think there's three things that could give us quite a hit that are sort of covered in there. And those are around children's services and placement sufficiency, because we are coming under pressure there, that we've got more children needing to go into care or into fostering, and we haven't necessarily got the placements in-house for various reasons. So it's the consequence and cost of having to go outside and potentially use resources that we wouldn't necessarily particularly want to. So how's that going to impact on the work in children's services? Because there are some real risks there. There's risks around legal challenge. And, you know, previously there was comment somewhere in one of the reports about almost not paying out unless the Ombudsman tells us, which is not a great way to deal with things. So there is a risk there, along with all the usual Housing and rough sleeping is another one, but I understand that there's been a task and finish set up, which is looking at, I think, housing in the round. And I'd imagine that the issue of temporary homelessness is going to come in that there's financial risks there. And they're not just financial risks, the risks with all of those, and adult services safeguarding capacity, that's a very high risk that things could go wrong there. And again, you could be looking at reputational risk as well as financial from possibly potential litigation and the cost of having to deal with that. So how are we mitigating those particularly high risks? And where is transformation in the short term and possibly the modern AI going to help us to maybe reduce those risks, because potentially there's quite a bit of a triple whammy there that could come up and bite us.
Okay, so on the children's related elements of your questions, I'll hand over to Heather to give a response, if that's it.
Hi, thank you, Sue, and I appreciate the questions. They're the kind of questions I was asking myself when I read all of the reports and all the papers. I think what I would say was a couple of things really. One is that we are, as a service, the service is definitely looking into the reasons why the numbers of children coming into care are greater than some of our statistical neighbours or our actual neighbours. We did have 56 more children come into our care last year, and the nearest comparisons were like 20. Although on the whole, per head of population, per head of 10 or 100,000 population, we are not out of kilter, but certainly the increase is coming in. So there's a lot of work going on within the service to really understand the hypothesis and the facts around that. And that's about testing all of our kind of front door. It's about testing our prevention. It's about saying what our courts are telling us to do, because sometimes they take us in places we would not necessarily go, and we don't have a choice. So we're doing that analysis as we speak, because we're very conscious and have been for some time the numbers are going up. I think there's also something about the business. You mentioned transformation of the business cases. Children's has been working on for the last year a transformation program, which we've been, revising and refining as we go along. Certainly, what we're pleased about is the recent government initiatives that have been coming out are in the same direction that we've been already thinking about, which is helpful, thankfully. So it is more about, say, family hubs, so you can get that prevention agenda in place. And then also the stuff about understanding exactly where our children are. And that sounds, I don't mean to be flippant about that, but certainly understanding children who are in and out of education and where they are. So the different legal things which are coming forward are playing exactly into our kind of direction, which is reassuring, which means the business cases that we've been working on for the last 6 months and are now kind of coming to fruition are actually helping us. So they're around things like ensuring that we are rewarding and recruiting towards both in-house foster carers, but also making the most of kinship care, because of course keeping children with their own families or their extended family, if it's possible, is always best. Some of the other things around room to grow. There's some ideas about trying to support our foster carers to have the best opportunity possible. The other one is also trying to disrupt the market. We've done quite a lot of good work with Homes and Horizons, but that's at that very top end of our most challenged children who were often placed furthest away. We need to start being more creative as well around looking at what we might be able to do to take back some control from the market. Always hard, but from those providers who might be giving really good care, but they're actually taking quite a big profit from it as well. So they're all the kind of things that we're looking at, and very much with support from our colleagues in finance to keep our thinking very straight and very honed to have business cases which will actually improve it. This is probably a bit more of a scrutiny answer than an audit answer, but to give that kind of background, as please don't think nothing is happening. Some of it is, I think something I said actually at full council, gosh, feels like a year ago now, but last week on Thursday was, we've got 3 different types of activities in our head and changes in our head. Some of it's about what do we need to do now differently within our control? What do we need to bring new policies in for? And maybe, and change things. There's a lot of policy work going on. We haven't been brilliant at our policies and keeping them up to date. So our policies have to embed what we can do. And the other is, do we need new resource? Do we need to do something completely different? So all those 3 things are things that Children's are working on, supported by finance.
Okay, I'm going to bring Alan in and then I'm going to move on, if that's okay. Yeah.
Just really briefly, if I may, Chair. So Councillor Osborne referenced the modern data and AI decision that's coming forward into executive. That's one of the reasons it's here is in direct response to a risk that was identified by the service. So there is currently a operational and tactical risk, certainly that's being held within my directorate, regarding the use of that data and how we have a solid and robust data platform. If that decision is taken by executive, that's exactly how we should see. So we should see an issue that's raised, whether the control environment is sufficient or not, and then as a result of that, whether further investment or activity is required. And that's exactly the journey we've been on through that decision. So if executive were to take that decision on Wednesday, the scoring for that risk will drop significantly, because the issues around investment, the issues around management and the construct of that service will then change as a result of that decision.
Okay. Any final comments? If not, thank you, Sarah, for your report. I think the committee has noted that, and we will move on. Okay, so moving on to item 9. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Chair.
Feel free, if you want to come sit at the front, you can do. It might be slightly easier for you. So this is the health and safety culture update report. So Dan's to introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. As the Chair said, I'm here to provide an update on the culture review that SWAP Internal Audit Services completed and published in January 12, 2024. So the SWAP culture review was initiated in September 2023 to follow the forming of Somerset Council on the 1st of April 2023 and undertake a baseline assessment of the Council's health and safety cultural maturity. On receiving the report identified several areas of improvement for the council, relating to, for instance, the governance arrangements for the new council not being fully embedded. That was something that was being implemented when the audit took place. In terms of the governance arrangements for the council, there was some settlement in early 2024 calendar year. However, as we progressed throughout the year, there was further instability in the council's health and safety governance arrangements that was brought about by the organisational restructuring and pending consultation. This resulted in several of the chairs that were chairing the various directorate level boards having their posts deleted as part of the restructure, and obviously other structural changes within the organisation. Thus, a year later, we were in a very similar position. However, I'm very pleased to confirm to the board that following the implementation of the new operating model for the council, the governance arrangements are now in place and reflect our organisation and operating model. That takes into account directorate level health, safety, wellbeing boards and the health and safety wellbeing steering group with overarching responsibility for monitoring the boards and providing assurance to the council's HR committee and executive leadership team. The SWAP review also identified limitations with performance reporting within the organisation. That was very challenging for health and safety at the time that SWAP completed their review. The Legacy County Council had a digital system for managing health and safety, as did one of the former district councils. It was incredibly hard during that period of much change within the organisation to maintain organisational structures within externally hosted systems and report out of those two systems into the governance structure that we had been establishing. However, we worked closely with our colleagues in ICT to develop a new health and safety system for Somerset Council. It was an in-house developed system, something that actually ended up being a finalist at the Public Sector Smarter Working Live Awards last year towards the end of 2024. It was a fantastic example of innovation within Somerset Council and our ability to develop our own systems and rely less on external third parties. But I think most importantly, what we have achieved out of the implementation of that system is improved performance reporting, and we continue to make progress in that area as outlined within the update report. Monitoring of health and safety training was also limited at the time, as we were in the process of implementing e-learning training for the council, mandatory training, along with other mandatory training courses other than health and safety that have been implemented within the council. That training is now in place. We regularly report on completion rates against that training to the directorate level health, safety, wellbeing boards and the steering group. The draft health and safety strategy that we're currently working on at the moment as well seeks to build on that training commitment by outlining an intention for accredited training for our directors, our heads of service and operational managers where required, by delivering IOSH accredited health and safety training. So that's the Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. Yes. I sang that one with you. I did, yes, sorry. Okay. Is that better? Yeah, okay, fantastic. So we're continuing to make improvements when it comes to health and safety training that's coming out of the Corporate Health and Safety Service. The culture review also identified that the health and safety policies within the council were out of date, which to some extent could be expected. The policies were, as Somerset County Council was the continuing authority of Somerset Council, many of the policies were based around the activities and management structure within Somerset County Council. Therefore, in October 2023, we began taking health and safety policies to the HR committee for approval. To date, we've taken around 34 health and safety policies to the HR committee. I think we've only missed 2 committee meetings in that time and are regularly taking policies. So there are 12 since the last update. The audit committee received an update in December. We've taken 12 since then. We've just completed consultation last Friday on 3 further policies, which will be going to the HR committee in January. That leaves us with 2 of the 39 policies to review, which we're hoping we'll be able to do and get them out for consultation in November, with the intention of taking those to the January HR committee also. That will conclude the first full cycle of policy reviews, but we will take a moment to reflect because we do feel that some policies should be sort of brought forward and looked at sooner than their minimum 3-year review requirement. And health and safety experience within the organisation being inconsistent across the organisation, and the need to review the structure of the health and safety service. So the health and safety service within Somerset Council has throughout its time experienced critical levels of resourcing following the forming of Somerset Council, and that's formed a major part of the council's strategic health and safety risk up until its most recent review. The Health and Safety Service has worked closely with the Executive Director for Resources Strategy and Transformation, Alan Jones, to review the structure of the Health and Safety Service, and a new operating model was implemented from the 1st of April 2025. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Congratulations on your nomination for the Innovation Award. That sounds like good progress from where we were. So, members, any questions? I suppose I'd like to ask you how well you think members are integrated into the overall health and safety strategy. Do you think members understand the culture that you're trying to achieve, and what could members do more to support a health and safety culture across the organisation?
Fantastic, thank you. I think, as outlined in the update report, much of our engagement with elected members has weighted towards policy reviews and updates through the HR committee. We do also want to report on practice as well as policy going into the HR committee, and that's where we see the sort of next evolution of those engagements with the HR committee. To really make sure that we're in the right place for that, we have an informal briefing session to follow the next HR committee session, where we will have a look at a couple of the most recent health and safety performance reports that we've developed. One around the information that we're gaining from IdeaGen and the health and safety wellbeing impacts that are being identified via IdeaGen, and another corporate KPI report that's been produced, quarterly report. So we're looking to discuss those 2 reports with HR committee in October. I think more generally, if the Audit Committee would like a similar engagement and a similar informal workshop to have a look at that information, then that would be something that we'd be happy to do. In particular, the Health and Safety Idea Gen risk report really is quite fascinating. The information that we've started to pull out of there, I think roughly 47% of the just over 200 risks that currently sit in IdeaGen have been updated with health, safety, wellbeing information, and it really does show where some of the key risks are within our organisation, but also where some of those risks that have been recorded are furthest away from their desired outcome. Some of the information that we can see from that is really, really fascinating.
I'm just looking at some of the reporting because Alan's got it open on his laptop. Sounds like something we would very much like. Well, I don't know. I'm going to speak for the committee there. It will probably be very helpful for us to have a deep dive workshop on that at some point in the future. Sue?
Yep, I think I'd probably go along with that because it sounds as though there's some very interesting information and it's relevant to come out of that. I think it's good to see that overall we seem to have made very strong progress in the health and safety field since, because I believe this was a 2024 swap audit. So it's good to see that we've gone forward in that, but that we do still have vulnerabilities in resourcing, training, and particularly embedding culture, because that's the bit that can be more of a challenge because it's usually winning over hearts and minds. What opportunity or how are you going to take advantage of the whole council transformation, where cultural change is a very big part of that, to actually achieve your goals in that? And also as well, another question is, have you considered or do we use external benchmarking? So we look at how we compare against other local authorities and look to share and perhaps nick some of their good ideas as well.
I forgot to bring Alan in at the end of that last question, so forgive me, Sue. Alan may have some answers to your questions as well.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. I think first and foremost, thank you to Daniel for his leadership here. I think this is one that we set out right from vesting day. And just to remind members of Audit Committee, officers requested this audit. So this is a non-opinion audit that we then presented to you to ensure there was complete transparency. So this wasn't a swap commissioned piece of work. We commissioned swap to do this because of the need to ensure that we understood what sort of culture it was, and it also wasn't a compliance audit. It's very much about the culture to be able to drive that through. So I think that's the first point. And I'll speak for Daniel. I do apologise for doing so, but we do benchmark, I think, to Councillor Osborne's point. So Daniel and I meet regularly to have a conversation about what is our performance, and that's my primary concern and that of the leadership team and Daniel and all the leadership teams associated with it. But then we also consider what other tricks and techniques are others using to help mitigate that. So it's less about benchmarking and more about generating those ideas and those insights. And then finally, I think just to the point, Chair, if you want to agree that as an action today, we're very happy to come back and not necessarily in formal session because it doesn't lend itself well to it, but I think a workshop for Audit Committee to show and demonstrate the data and reporting. But I would also say that all of that information is available to you right now. So it's available to you at the push of a button through our intranet site. You can check it out, see where the issues are, and there are a vast amount of reporting that's going on here. Everything from the number of incidents to which part of the body people have been impacted by as a result of health and safety incidents, right the way through to reporting of near misses and the like. It gives you a really valuable insight, but you see exactly what leadership teams are seeing as part of their mitigation measures.
There's lots of pains in the neck. Thank you, Alan. Any final questions on this report? If not, thank you, Dan, for coming along. I would like to extend the invitation to have an informal workshop around one of our future committee meetings. So look forward to hearing more from you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item 10, which is the internal audit plan progress report 25-26. And Alistair, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, so this is a report for the Audit Committee to note, and it's your regular update report on the progress against the internal audit plan. So it highlights changes to the audit plan, any significant findings that we feel we need to bring to your attention, and for you to be able to see where the plan position is. So if members first turn to agenda page 182, this gives an overview of the audit plan. So things to note on here, there are two limited assurance reports that I will be bringing to your attention.
There are 6 additions to the audit plan and 1 removal, and 3 follow-up audits have been completed in period as well. I'd also draw your attention to the recommendation tracking box at the bottom there on page 182 that shows 85 completed internal audit actions in 25-26 since the 1st of April, and that compares to 99 for the whole of 24-25. So again, we are seeing that general improvement around implementation of audit actions, which is good to see. If you then move on to agenda page 184, so as mentioned at my previous update, that we would update our risk assessment table in terms of where our audits are falling against these strategic risks. There is one minor change that we will make just to make sure our terminology is consistent with the authorities, and that is at the top there where it says Directorate Risk Link. Obviously, the terminology being used by the authority is operational or tactical, so we will make sure that ties in and does link in. So agenda page 186, this highlights changes to the audit plan that I need to bring to your attention. Most of the changes relate to grant work that's come in that requires audit sign-off. There are 2 additional pieces of work here where we've had gravity and revs and bends work ongoing from a project point of view. As we undertake that work, where there is a need for additional assurance, we will put in place a additional audit to pick up that assurance requirement. So you'll notice that migration reconciliations process is in there, as well as the investment plan assumptions on gravity. What isn't on here, because this report was written before that change was made, and just picking up a few points picked up earlier on the agenda, there will be an additional review around revs and bends, picking up system access. Also, the external auditors have picked up that has been a red area. We will be picking up and looking at that in the new system to give that assurance that these new access under NEC revs and bends is appropriate as it should be. So agenda page 188, this highlights one of the first limited assurances to bring to your attention, which is complaints handling. So while our audit was to look at the design effectiveness of the complaints management process, part of our risk assessment process is also looking at outcomes to see if outcomes are being delivered. You will note from the narrative on agenda page 189 that compared to similar authorities, the number of complaints is higher. Now, you might expect that given the disruption that the authority has gone through being a new authority. Some of our recommendations are there to hopefully strengthen that control framework and also work towards hopefully bringing some of the complaint numbers down. The other review to bring to your attention is on agenda page 190, which is the commissioning arrangements audit. So this was a cross-cutting piece of work looking across a number of commissioning areas in the authority. And one of the key themes, which again has already been mentioned extensively on this audit committee, is around purchase order compliance. And also, as you will note from the summary information there as well, that there are other strengths that could be put in place to improve and enhance the control framework around commissioning. As part of that commissioning audit, we did pick up the outstanding actions from a previous strategic commissioning audit that was in relation to Somerset County Council before it went to unitary. We did bring those recommendations forward to make sure that if they weren't relevant, that we had the evidence to suggest they were no longer relevant. So the new commissioning review that we've undertaken does supersede those actions on the previous audit that was done during Somerset County Council's time. Then on to Appendix D, which is agenda page 192 to 201. So this provides a summary of the audit plan, so you know the progress that we are making. It is split down into tables. So table 1 gives an overview of the assurance and advisory reviews that we're undertaking. Table 2 gives an overview of the counter fraud investigation work. Table 3, the grant sign-off work. And table 4, our follow-up work. So again, just to remind the audit committee, where we do give a limited or no assurance opinion, we will follow up on those reviews to ensure that the actions are completed. So that is a complete list of all the areas currently outstanding relating to a limited or no assurance. Just a few things to draw your attention to in our work. First, on agenda page 194, we have commenced our contract management and the Procurement Act audit, 2 separate reviews. Again, those will obviously tie into key themes that have already been raised at this audit committee, and it does include the contract management survey. So again, just to refresh the audit committee,
We undertook a survey that was reported to this committee back in 2023, and we did agree that we'd redo that survey when we picked up and did the contract management review in future years to see if there's improvement. So we will be conducting that survey and sharing those results with the committee. One final area to pick up is on agenda page 195, which is MSD, Financial System Access Controls. So again, we do have an audit in there to look at the system access controls and hopefully give assurance to this committee that the controls are appropriate and that all relevant audit trails are turned on, so then proper judgments can be made on what people are doing in the system. Final appendix then is Appendix E. So this lists all the outstanding priority 1 actions The latest updates are included on here, which are from the 10th of September when this report was written. But I will just comment on, obviously, the Life Factory outstanding actions, because I know there have been a few questions around those. So these are the agreed management actions for the project. As was the case, they were all waiting for the options appraisal work to be undertaken by management before any decision would be taken on moving things forward. We were given a revised date of the 31st of December that would be done, but as was mentioned in the update earlier, it's hopeful that will be confirmed in October in terms of what is happening with the options. So the 31st of December was very much a backstop date, but the latest updates are there. I will leave it there, Chair, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Alistair. Right, so open to members, Sue.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, again and again, that theme is coming out of poor control of contract management, commissioning. So that really has got to be sorted, or it's going to drop us in it. We've got limited assurance on those at the moment. How are we going to do improve that? There is some movement, I think, but not a huge amount. And complaint handling, again, that's been an ongoing issue that's been raised a number of times. So what steps are we taking to improve that, and how is perhaps modern data, AI, going to help with that, and over what time scale? With regards to the, dare I say it, Life Factory, a little bit unclear as to what reports are coming forward and when, because earlier in the week we got that email from Alistair saying that there was going to be this report coming forward in October, but it was going to be, I think, a management report. It didn't necessarily say it was options and appraisal, and it might be considering lessons learned. But there was also, I think, a further being done, which should have come in June, July, but has been deferred again, that one to December. And again, there's nothing in our forward plan to indicate when we're going to get to look at these. And that's quite important, because although we're focusing on the Life Factory, there is the whole scheme as a whole, which I think potentially presents some risk for us. They did their own health check internally. They got £20,000, I think, from the UK Prosperity Fund to do a health check. They got an independent consultant in who looked at 7 of the schemes, of which 3 were green, 2 were amber, and 2 were red. And the Life Factory was left out of that one because it's basically in a league of its own. And the other 2 were considered internal projects, but I believe now that consultant has been engaged to look at those. So will we be considering the risks from those? Because with the ACE project, the Avalon Clean Green, they actually found that instead of producing 10 watts of solar power, they were going to drop down to 1, and there was concerns over having to recalculate the benefit cost ratio because it needs to be 1 to 1, and it actually took them 2 attempts to do that. So is someone going to check that it actually does correspond with Greenbrook strategy? It's there in the latest minutes. If you want to see all this, just read the minutes of the Glastonbury Town Board, and it's all there. But I think it does raise concerns for us and red flags as to what is in those minutes. because I think we need to be looking at the project as a whole, and particularly the whole issue of match funding, because one of the projects was tasked to find around 6 million to match the 6 million it was getting. Has it done that? The Life Factory also controls the regenerative farming project, which was £1 million grant, £1 million funding. I think there needs to be a check on value for money over that one, because having a roughly agricultural background, I think that needs a little look at. As does the whole thing, because, and also, should we be putting the town deal into the risk register because of the potential that if government doesn't think that we've complied and we are the accountable body, that it should be on the risk register, because otherwise, if we have to start paying back serious amounts of money and possibly may face legal action from unpaid creditors, that is going to add quite a lot. So I would suggest that the town deal as a whole should be on our risk register, and also as an audit committee, perhaps we ourselves need to be taking a deep dive into it so we can figure out what's gone well, again, what's gone well, what's gone badly, and what questions we need to be asking, because if we don't ask them, do we really want government to be asking them to us and finding not in our favour? And finally, last of all, I understand from earlier answers that there is now a police investigation into this. When were you informed that that was happening? Because clearly that is now an impact on what we can say. And I hope I've not said anything there to compromise myself. And I would have hoped that someone from legal would have stepped in to shut me up.
So just on the point about creditors taking legal action against the council, we have no contractual relationship with them, so the chances of anyone successfully being able to come to the council to seek redress, I believe, are vanishingly small, as the update that I've received. Alistair, did you want to answer anything there from Sue? If you can, what you can and can't say.
I think just to clarify, I guess, the work, obviously the original audit that we undertook was reported to this committee in May. There was a separate piece of work which I also referred to in the May audit committee just around contractor payments, because the information being provided to Somerset Council kept changing. So it was a piece of work to look at whether we could actually draw a definitive line. I think I said at the time we were reliant on third parties providing information around that. There have been some issues with getting accurate and reliable information, unfortunately, around that. That is the piece of work that's currently at draft stage that's reported in there. In the June committee, reference was made to an update report. That is a management report that will be coming to this committee in terms of a lessons learned report. And the options appraisal work has obviously been going on because it's a very complex situation regarding the Life Factory, and various options obviously have a lot of implications. So those are the pieces of work that, as far as I'm aware, have been going on.
Okay.
Can I request, please, that those reports come to this committee, even if, and we should be seeing them, even if we have to do it in confidential session. I think you do have the power to ask for that, and I hope you will.
I will take legal advice on what we can and can't bring on this subject now, Sue, because even in closed session we run some risks. So I will take advice and revert to you. Liz, did you want to come in? And I've got Susanna online.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to point out that risk number ORG 006 is about economic growth, and regeneration is included in there. There were some comments about other projects within the town deal for Glastonbury, and you'll know as well the town deal for Bridgewater. One of them is in the planning system at the moment, and so it wouldn't be appropriate to comment on that at the moment. Another one, and some of the other projects have been phased. One of the bigger projects has been phased, and all of that information goes to MHCLG for approval. So none of this is working in isolation. It is all reported to MHCLG. Thank you.
Susanna, welcome. I don't know how much of the meeting you've heard today, but before you come in, I just want to say to you that the council is aware of a third-party referral to the police over the Life Factory issue. So we need to be very careful about what questions are asked in public, because they could potentially prejudice any ongoing investigations. So please, when you ask a question, can you be mindful of that? Both, I don't know if it's related to this issue, but I suspect, given your local residents' concerns, it more than likely will be.
Oh yeah, good morning. Sorry that I couldn't be there in person today. I have heard the vast majority of the meeting, so I'm aware of that, but thank you for just reminding everybody. Whilst we, in theory, cannot be directly sued by these contractors, the reputational damage to the council remains nonetheless. And I think we need to consider how, as a council, we're going to attempt to rebuff that. And then the other question I was going to ask is,
Susanna, so unfortunately that's not really a matter for this committee. In terms of audit, our function is very much looking at backwards at what's happened. If you're talking about prospective, I suppose, policy, then that's really a matter for, I suppose, exec primarily. So
I guess that was more really just a response to the previous answer, which was we can't be directly sued. Whilst that may be the case, there will still be reputational damage to the council. So it's just unfortunate, and I don't know. I mean, I've been asking questions about this left, right, and centre in various places for a very long time, as everybody knows. So I don't know the answers. I wish I had, because maybe things could have gone differently, but I've never known any of the answers. But I'm quite keen to understand the answer to part of the question I asked at full council, which surely is to do with audit, in terms of the actual land that belongs to the Regenerative Farming Centre, but is under the red brick building. And there was something about that there being a charge on that land by the council.
Yeah, it's not really relevant to this committee. I'll bring Alan in just to confirm that. Just one second.
Okay, thank you very much for letting me ask.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question, Councillor Hart. I don't believe it's relevant to the scope of this committee, but a response was issued as part of that question that you posed at Council, and of course a written response will be issued. The reason that it's not in the purview of this committee is it's looking at this committee should be looking at the control environment and the progress against the audit findings. Clearly, the audit findings are still going through that process, so it's very difficult to comment at this stage. But that is one of the core parts of this, rather than the specifics of the question you asked.
Okay. Other members' questions? If not, I'm going to ask one. So I specifically wanted to look at page 202. There was a couple of outstanding actions there for children's services in particular. The question around PRUs seems to me that doesn't seem to necessarily be a satisfactory answer at the moment. I suppose, Heather, where are we in terms of getting this assurance? When will the SLAs be in place?
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good question, a very timely question for us. Part of our deficit management plan, there's many moving parts to that one, but one that's come forward quite quickly and is in the process of being considered is how we organise the pupil referral units. As you know, there are 4 pupil referral units across the county, and there's also 2 what are described as behaviour partnership arrangements, where that's in the northeast and the southwest, essentially, of the county. One of the things that we've been doing as part of our desire to improve the outcomes for children and the control, if you like, of which children go into the PRUs and who come out in the best way and back into mainstream, was to actually look at the whole sort of technical arrangement of that in order to bring more control and consistency across the fall. So at the moment we have got a have had a consultation out, I think it's finished yet, it's finishing soon, out to schools and members of the public on a very technical issue, is where we wanted to actually bring, if you like, instead of having 4 separate PRUs, to try and bring those 4 schools, and they are schools, and they will continue as 4 schools, but bring them under one leadership team in order to improve the way that they're actually children are fed into them, the curriculum they get when they're there, and how we get them back out again. Because originally, of course, pupil referral units were principally created more for those children who couldn't go to mainstream school, very often for physical or learning disabilities, but actually over time they've been more for taking those children who get excluded from schools, often for different reasons around behaviour and so on. So we just need to refocus it, but that's out of consultation at the moment. So I think in terms of that to get to the SLA, if you like, we want to make this technical change to how they're actually governed and managed, so that we can control it better, and that would then almost preclude the need for an SLA per se, or it'd be much easier to write one for a singular outfit than it would be for 4 separate ones. I hope that helps, Chair.
That's helpful, thanks, Heather. Okay, failing any further questions, then Liz.
Just to say, Chair, I'm finding it difficult to work out exactly what page it is, but it's page 4 of Appendix 8E. That's the tactical and operational risks for communities, place and economy. Page 4 there is a risk that is specific to regeneration programme across Somerset.
Okay, thank you. Right, so moving to the next item, unless there are any final questions. No. Okay. So moving on to item 11, which is the Audit Committee work plan, which is set out on page 211 of the agenda pack, mainly for noting. Obviously, we've added the health and safety culture risk sort of deep dive workshop into that, but that will be outside of the normal committee meeting. That will be a separate workshop. So by my reckoning, that brings us to the close of the meeting. So thank you all for your engagement and contributions today. Look forward to seeing you at the next audit committee. Thanks all. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much.